Apples have the best marketing people on the planet. Consider the sheer variety of their tasty names. Red Delicious, Gala, Honey Crisp. They have the catchiest slogan, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And somehow, they managed to get a sponsorship deal with the most valuable company in the world. But most incredible of all, Apple's managed to pull off this branding coup in spite of the most scandalous origin story in the history of fruit. That's the tale that we read in this week's Torah portion, Bereishit. This fable is familiar to us. God creates Adam and Eve, grants them a perfect life in the Garden of Eden, and God denies them only one thing. Of every tree of the garden you are free to eat. Ume'etz hadat tov vara lo tochal mimenu. But from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you must not. As they say, you had one job. We know what happens next. Adam and Eve eat from the tree. God gets angry, and humanity is cast out of paradise. And in the starring role of forbidden fruit is, of course, an apple. At least, that's the image we've inherited from the Christian world. Starting in the 16th century, in European depictions of Eden, paintings and poems galore, we see the apple prevail as the preeminent symbol of temptation and human folly. But this is not how our Jewish ancestors envisioned this scene. Bereishit, notably, does not specify the type of produce that Adam and Eve consumed. In fact, the Hebrew simply reads, Pri ha'etz, the fruit of the tree. We have a mystery here. What was the tree from which Adam and Eve ate? As they're wont to do with any ambiguity in the Torah, the rabbis of the Talmud discuss this question in depth. Rabbi Lorge went first. He said it was a pickle tree because nothing causes more trouble than a tradition poorly preserved. I wish he were here right now. Yes, that one isn't actually in the Talmud, but like Adam and Eve, I just couldn't resist. Get back to our question. What was the tree from which Adam and Eve ate? The Talmud gives us three opinions. And please forgive our ancestors' less than scientific application of the term tree. Rabbi Meir goes first. He says that the tree must have been a grapevine because nothing brings about more wailing than wine. Makes sense. We know that sometimes wine causes people to make bad decisions, like doing the one thing that God tells you not to do. Rabbi Nehemiah goes second. He says it must have been a fig tree. Not a bad hypothesis, because what happens immediately after Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit? They realize that they are naked, and so they grab leaves from a fig tree to cover themselves. Fig tree, fig leaves, fall from paradise. It fits. But my favorite is the third theory from Rabbi Yehuda. He says the tree must have been wheat. Now I know what you're thinking. Grapes and figs, these at least are definitely fruit, but wheat? Come on. Still, let's hear Rabbi Yehuda out. He says that the tree must have been wheat because children don't know how to call to their parents until they've tasted grain for the first time. What does that mean? Rabbi Gail Leibovitz offers a compelling explanation of Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning. She writes that the earliest speech learning takes place at about the same time that infants begin to eat solid food, like grain. That is, the consumption of wheat is associated with the first stirrings of that most human of capacities, speech. When we begin to eat wheat and begin to speak, we become creatures who can communicate, creatures who can make choices, creatures who have knowledge of good and evil. I have to say, Rabbi Leibovitz makes a pretty convincing case for wheat. But if you're still skeptical, indulge me in just one more thought. Rabbanit Michelle Cohen-Farber points out that there's a significant agricultural difference between grapes and figs and wheat. Grapes and figs, you could just pluck them off the tree or off the vine and pop them in your mouth. Instant yum. But wheat, you can't just eat. You have to work to feast on the fruits of wheat. Consuming it requires energy and skill. Think about it. The forbidden fruit had to be tempting in some way. Something about it had to produce a hunger so strong that Adam and Eve were willing to defy the will of God. What desire could possibly be so powerful? The craving of creativity. Adam and Eve looked at wheat and they saw potential. They saw challah and pita. They saw cookies and cakes. They saw season 10 of the Great British Baking Show. They saw a delicious world of possibility that they could bake into existence. Sounds pretty tempting to me. Rabbanit Farber adds one more observation. How does the story of Eden end? God says to Adam and Eve, "B'zeyat apecha tochal lechem." By the sweat of your brow shall you eat your bread. The punishment fits the crime. You humans want so badly to bake your own world. Go forth and cultivate your own garden. The Torah tells us this week that God created humanity b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. But the story of Genesis never tells us what God looks like. So what do we know about God from the very beginning? We know that God has creative power. Bereishit bara Elohim, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. We know that God speaks, Vayomer Elohim, and God said, "Let there be light." This is what it means to be created in the image of God. God gave us the creative potential to speak worlds into being. Rabbi Yehuda was right. Apples, grapes, figs, these fruits fill our stomachs. The fruits of creativity fill our souls. When Adam and Eve saw the wheat in the middle of the garden, the spark of creation flickered inside them. They couldn't resist. What could be more human? Shabbat shalom.